the Ethics Committee, and 68 votes will be required to create a vacancy. Brad Tabke won on election night, he won in a recount, and he won in court. This agreement upholds the will of the voters as expressed in a free and fair election. While they have a one-seat advantage, Republicans will chair the committees. When we are tied, we will have co-chairs and equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans on all the committees, with the exception being the Oversight Committee, which will have a GOP chair and a GOP majority. Leader Dameth will be Speaker for 2 years, but with some limitations that align with our closely divided House and soon to be tied. House DFLers will be in the chamber today to provide a quorum, and committees will begin their work on Monday. This agreement honors and protects the will of the voters both in Shakopee and statewide. That is what Democrats have been asking for from the beginning, and I'm pleased that this agreement does that. Given the situation we faced, with Republicans looking to engage in an illegitimate power grab, Democrats made the difficult decision to deny quorum to protect the will of the voters, and we succeeded. That it took nearly 4 weeks to reach this agreement is regrettable and was unnecessary. This agreement is essentially the same as the last offer I put on the table on Monday, January 13th, including conceding the speakership. We could have avoided all of this, honored the will of the voters, and started in a bipartisan, collaborative fashion from day one. With that said, though, I would like to express my gratitude for all of the members of the final negotiating team on both sides of the aisle. It was really great to be in a room together with Representative Torkelson, Representative Scott, Representative Niska, Representative Robbins, Leader Dameth, Representative Stevenson, Representative Hollins, Representative Long, Representative Gomez. And I think it was all of us being in the room together. There were some moments of levity. There were some legislative jokes. There were some conflict-oriented jokes. And that got us to the place where we could get this bipartisan agreement. Prior to this conflict, I publicly stated that this tie gives us a golden opportunity to show that bipartisan governing can work. And even though we had these rough few weeks, we can turn the page now. And we have an opportunity to really show Minnesotans that we can govern together in a collaborative way. The 2024 election made clear that Minnesota is a very closely divided state. And I think that we can make this arrangement work for them. We are set up for success in this agreement. Democrats will continue working alongside Minnesotans to build a future where everyone can get ahead, not just the rich and powerful. We will continue to stand up for Minnesotans' rights and freedoms, and we will do all we can to protect them from the chaos, cruelty, and incompetence coming from the Trump administration. We're looking forward to getting the session properly, lawfully underway today. And with that, I turn it over to DFL Floor Leader Jamie Long.
Good morning, everyone. If Democrats had attended the first day of session without an agreement, the GOP, we know, would have kicked out Representative Tabke and would have attempted to take full control of the chamber for 2 years, even though the voters sent a tie. This agreement honors the voters of Shakopee and honors the voters of Minnesota who sent a tie to the Minnesota House. The co-governing agreement ensures that Representative Tabke is seated, and just as importantly, it prevents any party from unilaterally trying to remove a member in a future election contest by setting the vote threshold at 68 for an election contest. The agreement protects power sharing for all committees, including requiring bipartisan votes for all bills that are coming out of committee. The agreement ensures a bipartisan negotiation on House rules so that even in a one-vote advantage, the GOP can't set themselves up for permanent control. The agreement limits the ability of the Speaker to veto any agreed-upon legislative calendar. The agreement stops the effort of the GOP to acquire unilateral, unprecedented subpoena power to the Oversight Committee. The agreement protects conference committees by ensuring equal bipartisan membership. These add up to important constraints on the role of the speakership. The GOP also, importantly, still won't be able to pass a bill without us. Rather than an attempt at one-party control, which would have led to a perpetual power struggle, we are optimistic that this framework sets up opportunities for our members to work together on a bipartisan basis on issues that we all care about, like affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable child care, and more. And with that, we'll take questions.
What was the thing that helped break the logjam? I mean, was it the Supreme Court ruling that was coming today? I mean, can you give us a sense of, like, moved things?
I think, as of January 14th, the Republicans were not ready to concede that they should seat Brad Tabke. The court decision came out that morning. And I think that even though there were members of that caucus who were very clear to their leadership and their colleagues that having seen the evidence presented at trial, they would not be voting to oust Brad Tabke, I think there was some hope within their caucus that they could convince their entire caucus to unify and take that partisan action of getting rid of Brad Tabke, because that would give them a chance at 68. So I don't think they were ready to honor the will of the voters in Shakopee on the first day of the session, or until we got the Supreme Court ruling on quorum. The other thing they were not ready to do until the Supreme Court ruling on quorum was to share power. They wanted 2-year speakership and 2-year chairs. We were really arguing over, in the beginning, 27 gavels, the speakership and 26 committees. In the end, we have an agreement where there are 28 gavels involved. 26 of them will be shared, and 2 of them will be in Republican hands.
What did you have to give up?
The speakership, but that was very clear from the moment that we were 67, 66, that had to be the play to get the deal done.
So what will your title be officially? How, and will you be at the majority minority leader, Mike, and what do we call you?
Well, the funny thing is, in 2007, Margaret Anderson Kelleher had a new rule drafted to honor then former Speaker Steve Swigum. So the House rules will refer to me as Speaker Emeritus. So that, I know, it's really, it really makes me sound old. The other title that would work would be DFL Caucus Leader. But no, I will not be on the floor. It'll be that guy.
Okay.
Could you explain for us the giving up the speakership? I know you mentioned having given an offer on January 13th. But at what point did you give up to the point where you're now allowing the Republicans to have the speakership fully for 2 years, no more co-speaker?
Well, it's not fully. There's some constraints on it. It was very similar to what I put on the table on the 13th, which is speakership with constraints. And that's the final deal.
On the 13th that you offered, though, that Speaker Damon would be speaker for 2 years and you wouldn't have any co-speakership.
Yeah, they leaked it to the Reformer, which was interesting because I thought it maybe looked really reasonable. But yeah, they leaked that offer. We never made that publicly. Our caucus wasn't there. I was there. Our caucus wasn't there. I knew I could get our caucus there if it got us into the chamber on the first day of session, but the Republicans weren't ready to take it. Peter and then somebody else.
No, I want to make sure everybody.
Okay.
Could you explain some of those limitations that you explained to me?
Sure. I brought it with because it's not posted yet. At 67, 67, there'll be an even number of conferees on the conference committees. Each caucus will select its own conferees. We will make equal appointments to the boards and commissions. Each caucus will make its own appointments. We'll negotiate the odd numbers, and if we don't agree, there won't be an appointment made. The speaker must take up all the bills on the calendar for the day set by the Rules Committee, which will be tied and co-chaired under the tie. Signed conference committee reports will be taken up. We'll have shared decision-making on all House administrative and nonpartisan functions. And for the purposes of both floor and committee, each caucus leader may excuse their own members and approve remote participation.
Do any of those protections, say calling the question, we saw that at the end of last year yourself, what that tactic is there any protection?
You need 68 votes to call the question, and they don't have 68 votes.
But the speaker does get to make procedural rulings, right?
Correct.
That amendment is out of order.
Correct.
You would not have the votes to override the speaker's ruling if you were 67, 67. Is there any provision to give you a little bit more oomph on those sorts of procedural rulings by the presiding officer?
No, it's an attendance compulsion measure, right? Each side is definitely going to want to have all of their members there. So to the extent some folks have gotten used to going on vacations or things, during the session. We have a few Republicans who will have to be here all session long who haven't been keeping that
So
custom.
if she rules all of your amendments out of order, and you move to override the ruling of the speaker,
Well, we have the messy power of the filibuster. And Republicans deployed that, you saw, rather effectively whenever they were unhappy with my decisions on, excuse me, either on which bills to take up, which order. And so, you know, we of course have the capacity to be annoying, but that is a sort of a mutual torture thing. So I'm hoping that we can avoid that for the most part. Generally speaking, we have been able to come to agreements on amendments. So when I was presiding, you know, we would say like, what are your top 5? You know, you've got some in here that are out of order, but if you want to get a vote on them and you want to pull back like 25 of your other amendments, we can not raise the point of order on germaneness or budget resolution.
And if I could add too.
Yeah, please do.
No bill is going to get to the floor once we're back in a tie, unless there's bipartisan support, because there's a co-chaired rules committee. So there will have to be bipartisanship for any bill to come to the floor, and no bill will get off the floor without 68 votes. So whatever amendments they want to put on, they're going to need Democrats to be able to pass it. So they don't really have the same tools that a majority would, because they don't have a majority.
But in this time where they do have the, you know, temporary advancement committee, couldn't, with Speaker Damon, they suspend the rules to bring bills out of committee onto the floor and force you guys to take tough votes for campaign purposes?
No, to suspend the rules, you need 90 votes. But they will be able to move bills through committee, and they will be able to get bills to the floor. They just won't be able to send any bills out of the House chamber without our help.
What about the fraud committee? What was the decision behind giving the majority to the Republicans on that?
Well, we knew they needed some concessions to go back to their caucus with. I mean, they started this session 67, 66, and so there had to be some things they could go back to their caucus and say, look, these are the things that we got. This makes it worth it for us to cut this deal. And that was one of the things that made sense to work on with them. All of us together want to make sure that we have effective oversight of all of the spending and policy that we put in place. With a part-time citizen legislature, we don't have a lot of time for oversight typically. So we're eager to work on that. We passed a very comprehensive package in 2023 of oversight measures, and we're looking forward to working with the Republicans to see how all those pieces have been implemented by the Walz administration. I think Matt had a question from a Greater Minnesota reporter.
Yeah, we got a question from WDAY Radio. The question is, did this agreement happen because, as the Republican Party of Minnesota said in a release, because of 7,000 Minnesotans signing a recall petition?
No. The Republicans have filed frivolous recall petitions before, which we've had dismissed. I remember 3 to 6 in 2019, and these will be dismissed as well. The reason why I think we finally have a deal is the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled on quorum on January 24th and invalidated everything that Republicans had done from January 14th to January 24th. And at that point is when the negotiations really began in earnest.
Were there
On that
concerns
point-
about the ruling that could result from the hearing that was scheduled for today, though? I mean, did that-
You'd have to ask them. Obviously, I think that Steve Simon's case was a lot stronger than the Republicans' case. We filed... It's okay. We filed an amicus brief, so I think, you know, on the briefing, I liked our side of the case much better, but you'd have to ask them if that was an influence. The KSTP poll showing that 55% of Minnesotans wanted us to enter into a power sharing agreement did come out about 45 minutes before we inked the deal, so I'm not sure if that was a factor.
Is there anything in this deal that obligates the Republicans to drop the recall drives? Or at least obligates the us Republicans to try to prevail upon the state party organization?
No, they claimed distance from those recall petitions, so.
What bills can Minnesotans expect in the first couple weeks here? They need bipartisan support, so is there a discussion about what policies can be passed in the next couple weeks?
We haven't had a lot of substantive discussions on policy. The thing that we have discussed is our shared interest in passing a balanced budget within the regular session. Nobody wants a special session. Nobody wants a government shutdown. They're very suspicious of us. We're very suspicious of them. And the idea that folks would be unreasonable in budget discussions, but we do seem to share the principle that we need to get a budget done. And so I think all of our energy will be focused on that. And one of the fun moments of the negotiation was Ways and Means Chair Paul Torkelson and soon-to-be Ways and Means Co-Chair Zach Stevenson's no shenanigans handshake deal. Do you wanna speak to that?
Yeah, Representative Torkelson and I have had good preliminary conversations about working together. I'm confident that we'll be able to work together. And we committed to work together on the budget to get the budget approved on a timely basis out of Ways and Means in a no shenanigans handshake.
You literally said that in your.
It was, yeah, literally called it a no shenanigans handshake.
Well, that was Paul Torkelson's words, so. Paul Torkelson has a lot of chainsaws. We also learned that.
Speaker Emeritus, when we were at Veterans for that presser, you talked about how lawyers prefer to settle because they can control the terms.
That's right.
Wasn't that a factor, though, in this case that's maybe still going to be discussed upstairs for both of you? That this was a way I mean, if you lost that case upstairs, they could start doing things like trying to compel and fine and things like that. That was a risk. And they had a risk of then losing a second time and having nothing at the end. Don't you think that had something to do with breaking this thing?
No, we were very clear on the fact that the Minnesota House of Representatives cannot compel the attendance of absent members until it's organized. There's no sergeant, there's no comptroller, there is nothing to direct. So until the House is organized, that provision of the Constitution doesn't come into play. We thoroughly researched that before we decided to deny quorum. We knew what the risks were, and we felt that the risks were worth undertaking. So we did not have concern about how that lawsuit would come out. The Republicans perhaps did, but I think it was just time. I think probably more than anything, we had reached the moment where it was time.
On the money issue, the Republicans probably have hammered your party every single day on the amount of money that was made while you were denying quorum. How do you think that message might resonate with voters in a couple of years?
Well, I think that Republicans unconstitutionally and illegitimately seizing power and playing house for 2 weeks is also something that should concern voters. The Republicans knew that what they were doing was wrong, and they chose to do it anyway, should they get paid for violating the Constitution for those 2 weeks. So I think playing those kind of petty games don't further, our work together this session. Members were working. On their side, they were working to try to have committee hearings. On our side, we were working in our districts. So I think it's time to turn the page on that and move on. I also think that voters don't want politicians who are just going to put their finger in the wind and do what's ever popular in any given moment. They want people who will stand up for their principles. And I think in this country right now, it is especially important that we stand up to protect our democratic institutions and the rule of law.
It appears you got less this time than the last time in the House where Democrats got the gavels. Secretary of State Joan Grow, who presided every day for a long time back then, said Democrats had the upper hand because they had solo committee chairs. Republicans got the speaker. Was it the residency issue that put you at a little bit of a disadvantage on getting the same power sharing last time?
I think this is actually a much more balanced agreement than in '79 because the constraints on the speakership combined with the shared gavels in all of the committees set us up for collaboration. What they did in '79 is Democrats controlled some committees, Republicans controlled other committees, so they didn't start collaborating until they got to the floor. The way we have it set up, nothing will be able to get to the floor unless there's bipartisan collaboration first. So what I wanted to do was decentralize responsibility and decentralize conflict so that the chairs of the respective committees have to work things out, not leadership at the end of the day, not on the floor.
Any thoughts about Curtis Johnson putting you guys in this position in the first place?
No, I think it was the Republicans' unwillingness to honor the will of the voters. Because imagine for a moment we had come in on the first day, 67-67. We could have tied out at presiding officer for this many weeks to get them to agree to honor the will of the voters in Shakopee and to honor the power sharing agreement. So I think that that's a little bit of a red herring because the biggest issue here was honoring the will of the voters in Shakopee. And I think, in fact, there would have been a lot more pressure on those few principled Republicans who were not willing to vote to overturn the results of the election, understood that the voters had spoken. There would have been a lot more partisan pressure on them because that would have been the only way to get an advantage would be to do a partisan ouster of a duly elected member. And that could have been very ugly as well.
So how about,
Should we read anything into the fact that this is not a joint press conference with yourself and
Well, I think we're going to have to work to get to the point where we're collaborating together in a bipartisan way. Leader Dameth and I had a very positive relationship from November 5th through December 20th. Things got rocky on December 23rd. Obviously, a lot has happened since December 23rd. I think we'll be able to work together well, but it will take some time. We're certainly, everybody's still pretty angry at each other.
So how should we expect things to unfold on the House floor then this afternoon?
Boring. You should expect it to be boring. I would expect that Secretary Simon will call the House to order. There'll be a prayer, there'll be a pledge. The clerk pro tem will take the roll. A quorum will be present, and we will proceed to the election of the presiding officer. I would expect there'd be 67 votes for Lisa Dameth, and that there would be 66 votes for Melissa Hortman. And then after Leader Dameth is sworn in as Speaker of the House, the next order of business will be implementation of the power sharing agreement.
Even with the no negotiations, or sorry, no shenanigans, do you see any situation where this deal could fall through?
Representative Dameth gave her word that this deal would be implemented, and I take her at her word.
Do you think the side won, or did each party get something from this? Do you think it's equal, or someone won?
No, I think the way that you get a compromise is give and take. You have to have give and take. I think what we got was what we were seeking from the beginning, was honoring the will of the voters in Shakopee and statewide. What we wanted was a power sharing agreement. We got a power sharing agreement. We wanted Brad Tabke to be seated. We got that. The Republicans wanted the speakership for 2 years, and they wanted a committee on oversight, and they got that.
How do you feel about the timeline, especially with respect to deadlines?
We have plenty of time. The budget forecast will be late this year because the forecaster that gives us our economic data is running behind. So we won't even get the economic forecast until March 6th, which puts the governor's budget arriving on our desk somewhere around March 19th. And we'll be at 67, 67 on March 17th.
You talked about how it took a little bit for your caucus to get on board with the idea of giving up the speakership for 2 years, but you were there much earlier. Can you just talk about maybe what they had thoughts about and how you got them to come around?
Well, I'll say from my perspective, I have 26 individuals I had appointed co-chairs. I had 26 additional individuals I had appointed co-vice chairs, and they had spent 60 days doing work. So if I could trade one gavel for 52 opportunities for bipartisan collaboration, for me, that was a no-brainer. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to where the caucus was.
Yeah, I'll say that Speaker Emeritus Hortman was more selfless than the caucus was. The caucus is very protective of our leader, and we are loyal to our leader, and she has led us through some incredibly challenging and productive 2 years, including the session that we had the last two. But it was a real sacrifice, personally, I think, for Speaker Emeritus Hortman to take this step. And I think the caucus recognizes that and is grateful to her for her being willing to do that.
As lawyers, is there any relief in not going to the courts? Because the courts have already been asked to decide, and they decided once for a Democrat, once for a Republican. If they decide on this, that balance would be off. You know, just the nonpartisanship in the courts. Is that good for separation?
I think the people who are most relieved if that case doesn't go forward are the Minnesota Supreme Court justices, because their order on January 24th essentially said, leave and don't come back.
Did you give Representative Dameth any advice on being Speaker?
I have not.
Do you think in hindsight, you would have denied quorum until March if that was necessary?
Yes. We made the decision knowing the risks.
What about your freshmen? Did they get a miss out on the first month, and does that harm, relationships and their experience?
They have a unique set of experiences. They will be forever in the history books as the first denial of quorum in Minnesota history. And we, I think, are very, very bonded as a team as a result of this difficult time. We did not take it lightly. This is not the path we chose. This is the path that the Republicans forced us into because there was no other way for us to protect the will of the voters. And we were not going to be complicit in having the Republicans throw out a duly elected member of the legislature.
Time for one more question.
What happens with doing something to prevent a tie?
You know, I understand nonpartisan staff have some ideas. I'm really curious how that will work. The legislature drew the districts differently in 1970. The court struck it down. The legislature drew 135, so we couldn't have a tie. And the court said, you can't do that. We have a one-person, one-vote standard in the Minnesota Constitution. So we will definitely be working on that this year at some point. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I was told just to, yeah, move it.
Yeah, no, it's, yeah, I'll look at that.
I'll say, take the first question. Just say that. Oh.
Yeah, right.
No, my mom really dropped the ball at my cupcakes. She sends me cupcakes with DC every day. I know, every year she sends. I don't know what she's sending. She finds a different one every year. So I don't know which one is this year. But she said they won't come till tomorrow. And then the other presents will come till Monday. She's like, sorry, you're 30 and we forgot about you. I know. I'll find some cookies to bring in for you. Like my own house, I just moved. It's in disorder. St. Paul. We have boxes everywhere, we just moved. She makes her out to make cookies, otherwise Peter, who left the trees on the house? It was you. There was a cookie and a muffin. I thought it was you because of the, are you her house? The house in the cake or okay, that was just like the Kurt Dow. Remember when he was like, we're gonna go on hibernation. Are you a bear?
No, we're gonna go.
Yeah, you were right. And then I said, are you a bear? On tape. Are you a bear?
Yeah.
There's the tape somewhere. It was like side to us. And it was like, are you a bear?
Didn't Guy do it?
He did, yeah. I should find it. I can probably find it somewhere. It was like, what, 3 years ago?
Someone's gonna do it. Someone's gonna like get their own
I actually do have a second to renew it today, but she unfortunately was thrown this today. Has no contact.
Feel nice and fresh.
Let me send it to her.
Yeah, you have to get it.
Where's the otherwise? Well, not enough. I'm gonna try to work How do I find this stupid tweet? I want
How long has this been in the press room?
Just since the redesign.
Oh, so not that long.
It's actually on the other side of the building.
Oh.
Yeah, this is a completely new location.
Was it the same offices and everything, like just on the other side?
A tenth of the size.
Okay, yeah.
Closets.
Yeah, because this, was this maybe 10 years ago or so, or 5 years ago?
Yeah, about 10. Yeah. No, that was a great.
Oh, wow, okay. Sure, yeah. Yeah. Was it in the, so it was in the basement, or was it on the other side?
Yep, basement, other than.
Oh,
But it was fun.
interesting, yeah.
Everybody.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah.
For 7 months.
Okay, yeah.
Usually, how do I answer this?
Right, Yeah, now we can see the additions.
I know, it's like, did you see New Brinley in the back?
Well, good morning. Thank you for being here today. We are happy to tell you, as you, I'm sure, have already heard, that there was an arrangement or an agreement to organize the House made last night. We had two negotiating teams, so there is an agreement between Democrats and Republicans to organize the House of Representatives and get to work for the people of Minnesota. With that, I will tell you a little bit, and I know that the agreement is going out today. It was available as of 9 o'clock. Not sure if you've seen it yet, but I just want to tell you what is available in this agreement that we're really pleased about. As you know, Republicans are at 67 members. Democrats, because of an open seat in Roseville, are at 66 members, and the agreement that has been reached definitely reflects that. We will have, I will be the Republican Speaker of the House for the next 2 years. During the time that we have the one-seat majority, there will be Republican chairs in every committee with a one-vote advantage of the membership. If we would return back to a 67-67 tie in the Minnesota House of Representatives, we would then enlist co-chairs and full equal voting of the membership. There is an important committee that we've talked about that I'm very pleased how this came through in the organizational agreement, and that is the Fraud Prevention and Agency Oversight Committee. As you know, there is record fraud in the state of Minnesota, proven with 3 new cases even just last week. This is something that House Republicans have taken very, very seriously, and with that, the committee will be chaired by Representative Kristen Robbins for the entire 2 years. She will be the sole chair. The makeup of that committee will be 5 Republicans and 3 Democrats through the entire 2 years. That is a win for Minnesotans. We know that we need to stop fraud. We have to first identify it, stop it, and move forward with policies, and we are really pleased to be able to bring that forward. So with that, we had a great negotiating team that came in just this week, and that was Majority Leader Niska, Representative Torkelson, Representative Robbins, and Representative Scott. We met with the same offer that you had been seeing from the Democrats for the last more than 2 weeks, since the 13th. They walked in with the same offer on Monday. I think enough started to shift that they decided they needed to become a little bit more serious in their offer, and so that's when negotiations on Tuesday moved a little bit closer together and true conversations could take place. That is why we are standing here with you today. That was signed by our 5 members that were on the team and their negotiators together in the same room. I know a lot of you wondered what was in that room. I saw some of you pacing back and forth and maybe wondering what was taking place. A lot of good, hard discussions. The best negotiations is when not everyone walks out completely happy. But the compromises that were made, having a Republican speaker with very little limitations over the next 2 years, is a huge win for Republicans. It is a huge win for the state of Minnesota. To have fraud not just talked about, but actually addressed and corrected is a huge win for the state of Minnesota, the taxpayers of Minnesota. We have a lot of work to get done. I know Representative Hortman and I have both agreed that we need to get this done for the people of Minnesota on time. That is the intent. Even with Democrats staying out for 23 days, that is the intent that we have going forward, that we will work for the people of Minnesota and get that work done. House Republicans, although we had started and then the Supreme Court decision changed the start that we had to the session, the work never stopped. Our chairs continued to meet with their committee members, with interest groups, with constituents, to hear bill proposals, and we're dropping a number of bills today that will be our priority. That work continued to go through, so when you see that first committee hearing that'll start Monday morning at 8:15. That first meeting is going to be the fraud committee. We are ready to go with a full slate. We look forward to working with our Democrat colleagues as they return today to the chamber, and we look forward to getting the work together. Also with me today is Majority Whip, Representative Nash, and has done a lot of work within our caucus too. So with that, if there's anything you want to add, Leader Niska?
Sure, I'll just add a couple of important points on what were important principles that were established in this negotiation. Obviously, in our system, when legislators show up for work, we have elections and we are expected to uphold those election results. And the reality of it is that at any point in time when it was a 67-66 Republican majority, the only outcome of that election was going to be that Lisa Dameth is the speaker. And it's unfortunate that Democrats denied that outcome for several weeks, but that was an important principle that was upheld in this agreement, that election that has to happen when we come together and get organized is going to result in Lisa Dameth being Speaker of the House, and Democrats have accepted that outcome of an election. Again, in the eventual possibility that we get to a 67-67 tied chamber, it was important that we have a structure that would allow the work for the people of Minnesota to get done even in that. And so this agreement brought those two principles together in a way that I think is very important for the way our system is supposed to work, but also the way that our system can work best to make to do the work for the people of Minnesota, stopping fraud, making Minnesota more affordable, improving our public safety, improving our education system by reducing mandates and increasing accountability, by allowing us to build for the future. All of those important priorities that are important to the people of Minnesota that we've heard about, while we also are finding a way to bring together Republicans and Democrats to get the budget done on time, and hopefully without a special session.
Madam Speaker, you made history officially. I don't think you mentioned it. Talk to us why you don't talk about that you're the first person of color that will have this gavel.
Sure. It is my honor to have been selected by my caucus to become the Speaker of the House, and then you will see that vote go through on the floor today. Mary, what you're referring to is something that I don't always bring up, but being a Black woman and having the opportunity to serve as the first person of color and the first female Republican Speaker of the House is an absolute honor. I have always lived my life in a way that your merits should definitely be what drives the things that you do. And so I first want people to consider the fact that I'm qualified to do the job as Speaker of the House in the state of Minnesota. Secondly, knowing that I am making history on two fronts by being a Black woman, the first to hold this position, and then also the first Republican female leader or Speaker of the House is an honor, but I look forward to the day that it will no longer be a surprise or an unusual thing, that those coming behind me will be able to feel like there's no reason why they can't fill these same things if they have the qualifications and the merits that would bring them through.
What was it that moved the needle on this finally? I mean, we heard from the Democrats that this is largely the same deal that they had on January 14th. Is that true? And what was it that kind of...
You know, that's a great question, because I have also heard that this seems to be the same deal. As I mentioned earlier, when we came in Monday morning, they really had the same deal that they had been offering since the 13th of January. That was not acceptable. That was Speaker for, they said February 6th, thinking that the special election would be called for. What they were really looking at, though, was the fact that they didn't like the math of the situation. They didn't like the fact that there was an open seat, which only gave them 66 people in the chamber. The other thing is that would have been Speaker and title only. Everything else would have been shared. If we went back to a tie, it would have all been 50-50, the co-speaker model, everything. This is a considerable different offer. Things that move the needle forward, I think the public pressure to know that people could stay out of work for 23 days where they had been elected to come in and serve in the House of Representatives, to just stay back because they didn't like the math of the situation. They were losing in the public perception of that. We do have the court case that would have potentially given us the opportunity to get people back into the the session and get back into the chamber to do the work. I think a combination of all of those things, and the other thing is 23 days is a really long time to not do what you've been elected to do. So as you hear from your constituents, just go back. We had heard that maybe 1 or 2 Democrats might come back. I don't know if there was internal pressures on them or not, trying to avoid that, but I think a combination of the length, the public pressure, the pending court case, and the fact that we actually have work to do for Minnesotans, and that timeline is shrinking, all fit together.
So you're self-serving as the speaker, just broadly, not co-speaker, not speaker.
It will be a single, I will be the only Speaker of the House in the state of Minnesota. It will not be shared over the next 2 years.
That was a recent development.
That is a yesterday development.
What did you have to give up for this deal?
I think when we looked at the things beyond and what was going to be, not having Republican chairs for the entire time was something that we definitely gave up. So we have Republican chairs while we are at a 67, 66, and then it'll go back to co-chairs if it returns to a tie. That was a big give, because we wanted to make sure that the priorities that we've been hearing about over the years are moved forward. But in a shared model, we know this will be workable.
Why did it take this long for the Republicans to agree to seat Brad Taffy?
It's really interesting with that seating. What we wanted to do in the House was we wanted to have a full hearing on the situation with Brad Tabke. Again, 14 votes is what he won by. 21 ballots were destroyed by an election official. We will have that full hearing in the Ethics Committee. That is something that we will be able to hear. It'll be obviously public, but we'll be able to hear that in the Ethics Committee.
But he's not going to be able to be unseated, so why did you decide to concede that, and how did you convince your caucus to seat him when some members said it didn't want to?
I think it's going to be important that we can have that full hearing in the Ethics Committee to really prove the things that were proven both in the court case and the concerns that we have. From there, there could be a recommendation, or there could be a report brought back to the full body. That's up to the Ethics Committee, and that hearing will take place in the next couple of weeks.
But he won't be able to be unseated.
We'll have to see what it results. It doesn't look like it at this point.
Doesn't look like it, or won't, because the Democrats said pretty much their entire basis for this agreement was the fact that Taffy would be seated. So is there any chance that you still wouldn't seat him?
It doesn't look like we'll be able to do that.
Is there any one thing that forced this agreement to happen last night? Was there any one or a couple of deciding factors that now's the time to act?
I think the reality of the timing and the ongoing stalemate here, as far as them staying out and not coming to work, I think the pressure really got to a number of their members. I can't speak to that, but that's what we had been hearing.
Was there pressure on your members as well?
Our members were showing up for work. There was frustration because we couldn't get bills introduced and we couldn't have our actual committee hearings, but Republicans were here every day doing work from morning until late afternoon, and so there was frustration that we couldn't do it.
Tell us about the handshake, no shenanigans.
Representative Torkelson and Lead Stevenson apparently had, I was in the room, had a handshake. Do you remember what you called that, Representative Torkelson?
Was it like the handshake?
Really, it just signified that we know we will be working together, most likely. We will be working together. He'll be the Democrat lead on the committee. And should we come back to a tie, we will act as co-chairs. It really just signified that we understand that and that we know that we will have to listen to each other and work towards solutions that can actually become law. The work is just beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm glad we're getting to it and not delaying that any longer. The question about what made things change yesterday, it was a dramatically better offer from the Democrats that got the ball moving. They made major changes in their offer, and including the Speaker of the House, which is the headline, but there's other things. And it's not just the Speaker of the House with a whole bunch of restrictions. It's the Speaker of the House with virtually all the powers of the Speaker. That's very important to us as a caucus. And, one of the things we talked about a lot in these negotiations was the integrity of the body. That was really threatened by the actions that the Democrats took. And going to the Supreme Court to get told how to operate is not satisfactory. That's not the way the system was designed. We need to do our own work and make our own agreements. Thank you.
Was last night the first time they made the speaker offer?
Yesterday,
That was the first time.
yes.
If you ask Democrats, though, they say there are constraints to the speakership. You know, you still need, obviously, of course, 68 votes to pass bills, but there's some other guardrails that they mentioned. So I guess, you know, Representative Torkelson, you said that the full powers of the speaker, how do you see those terms?
Yep, there are a few conditions with that, not near what a co-speaker or a 50-50 would have been. What we see with this, though, is when it comes down to conferees, that we'll have an equal number of conferees that are chosen by Leader Hortman and then myself, rather than the speaker just appointing all of the conferees. That'll be toward the end when we actually are coming closer to wrapping things up. We'll have the ability to approve any type of absence or remote, each of our own caucus, so I will be able to do that, as will Leader Hortman for her caucus. There would be shared decision-making on any administrative or nonpartisan functions, including appointments to commissions and boards. And so that's something that the speaker typically would have done. Even though the minority has a few people, it would have been more weighted on the majority. So there were some small compromises that acknowledge the fact that if we do go back to a tie, there is some of those concessions. The other thing is that handshake was the no shenanigans handshake, and happy birthday, Caroline.
And the speakership was offered Tuesday, or Wednesday, whatever day it was. When did you offer to see Brad Tapley?
Those conversations were taking place as our discussions happened this week.
Speaker, can you talk about your governing style from the podium, ruling on germaneness, for instance, in a 67 world?
Sure.
What's your style then?
Yeah, I think that's really important. As you know, we can move bills through committees and out of committees and onto the general register during this time of just Republican control. We know that. We also recognize the fact that we need 68 votes to pass a bill off the House floor, and that we fully know. We've always talked about that. There has to be cooperation all the way through our committees to get things to that point. My style of leadership has always been very collaborative, wanting to work together. As far as those germaneness situations and things come up, I think it's important to recognize that over the last 2 years, with the majority held in Democrat hands and the full trifecta in the state of Minnesota, it really felt like conservative voices were pushed out. What I would like to do as Speaker is recognize how it feels to be in the minority and rule as fairly as possible, recognizing the frustration that can be there, still doing what is needed to uphold the integrity of the institution and not compromise that.
Should the Republican Party of Minnesota drop their recall drive?
You know, that's a great question for the state party. I know they are pushing on that recall for nonfeasance. That would be a great question for them. We're not involved in that process or that the decisions on that directly.
We did have a couple members who stood, though, with the Republican Party in announcing that.
Yeah.
Should those members reach out?
You know, as far as how they want to continue working with the state party, they definitely have that right and can do that. But that's a great question for the state party to know where they land on that. That is a very long process.
Can you talk about what we can expect from you all while you have the 67, 66 for the next?
Sure. What you will see is you'll see bills that are going to be moving through committee in a very fair manner. We know that eventually we're going to need 68 votes to get through, but there are priorities. When we look at our failing educational rates, you know, our kids, not even half of them in some cases can even read at grade level. We know there's a lot of work to be done. We know capital investment is a priority, but those core elements in capital investment, roads, bridges, wastewater, those are the things that'll be considered. We also recognize the fact that we need safe communities, and we know that we're headed toward a budget deficit in the next few years, and we have to make responsible decisions. We can no longer raise taxes on Minnesotans. We have to find practical ways, and we look forward to working with the commissioners and the agencies to fully understand what is needed in each one of their areas so we can find cost savings and do the right thing for Minnesotans. That is just like the tip of the iceberg. There is so much. You will see a few hundred bills that'll be introduced again today. We already had over 300 in our 2 weeks when we were trying to get to work for Minnesotans. You will see those bills move forward, but it'll be things that people can get behind, that they will want to vote for and do the right thing for the state of Minnesota.
Representative Nash, what are your hopes for anti-fraud legislation? What are going to be the top priorities?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. As the speaker just said, and to answer the question that came over here, the top priorities, House Files 1 through 3 will be in my committee at State Government Finance Thursday of next week, and we're going to pass them out, move them on to the General Register or to Ways and Means. And I think that Minnesotans have begun watching more and more and more as we see more waste, fraud, and abuse. We saw last week about the daycare issues. We've seen a myriad of things, and you and I talked about it when I was on your show. Those are going to be some of the priorities that Minnesotans are going to hold us accountable to making sure that we dispense with. We have to address the waste, fraud, and abuse. As Chair of State Government Finance, my commitment to my caucus and to the state of Minnesota is that we're going to get these things moving so that Minnesotans can have a realistic expectation that all 201 legislators are looking to prevent future waste, fraud, and abuse and to hold the past waste, fraud, and abuse accountable.
House File 1 through 3, same as before, we remind us.
Correct. So House Files 1, Chair Robbins can come up and also opine on that, but House Files 1, 2, and 3 will be a new independent inspector general. There will be, House File 2 is a greater enhancement of holding some of the activities accountable, and mine as House File 3 is, as we've been calling them pejoratively, fraud notes. So those will be in committee on Thursday and out of committee on Thursday. And so I think that if you wanted to talk more waste, fraud, and abuse, that Chair Robbins might also be willing to answer a couple of questions. Well, given that we're about to walk in and see bipartisanship for the first time in a little while, I think that you can expect, yes, that there will be some, because I would be shocked if my colleagues on the DFL side of the aisle were not in favor of preventing waste, fraud, and abuse and to try to slow that down moving forward.
Do you feel a sense of urgency to get some of these priorities through committee over the next month or so while you are assured you have the gavel?
Well, I have had a sense of urgency since I dreamt up House File 3 on the back of a boat over the summer. So I think that the urgency has been, with a cigar, thank you, Mary. So I had a cigar, and I think that there is an urgency in the people of Minnesota to say, enough. This is enough, and we want some responsible leadership to be brought to bear in St. Paul. We've been down here for every day since the 14th, and what we've been hearing through email and voice messages and other things is get to work. So the urgency has been there from the very beginning, and I think that the urgency you can also see in the election where Minnesotans said we need a change and we need to have an ending of the trifecta.
Representative Vista, we get an update on the Supreme Court hearing.
Sure. So we did notify the Supreme Court yesterday that the case that's before them will likely become moot at 3:30 or 3:40 or sometime this afternoon. And our attorneys suggested to the court that they may want to reschedule the oral argument. The court decided to go forward with the oral argument. So I think it's probably happening right now.
Madam Speaker, what kind of threat does the potential federal budget cuts give you as far as shaping a budget? Sounds like quite a bit of money might stop coming to Minnesota.
You know, we will watch what happens at the federal level and how that directly affects the state. We know that our budget forecast does not come out until March 6th, but already our Ways and Means Chair and our committees are all looking for both cost savings, what we've spent over the past, and taking those things into consideration. We have a lot of work to do in a very condensed amount of time, and we're up for the challenge, but we have to be realistic about both federal and the state dollars that'll be available.
I think Peter Callahan has a question.
Because he's so shy.
It was my birthday.
Hello, Peter. How are you today?
After you're elected speaker.
Yes.
We understand that there will be a resolution brought to the floor that will contain this agreement.
Yes.
Do you expect all 67 of your members to vote yes?
I can't give you that direct answer right now. I know there's great support for the work that has been done on it. I have a copy of it right here. That's what will be attached, but we'll go ahead and do that as part of the rules, the temporary rules that move forward.
I guess meaning you have a group that doesn't like this deal
I do not have a group that doesn't like this deal. Everybody is really excited to get to work and start doing the things that they've been elected to do.
Madam Speaker, before you had mentioned rolling back some DEI initiatives, there's been a lot of pushback in the legislature, the governor, even Senate Republicans said we're not focused on that. How do you feel about that?
You know, I had not originally, back in December, talked about rolling anything back. The letters that each one of our chairs sent out to each one of the commissioners, the agencies, asked some basic information. Wanted to know how many of their FTEs were unfilled for more than 6 months. How many of the new ones out of the 6,000 that were just added the last 2 years were still unfilled. We asked for how much space was being used, either leased or owned, and at what capacity. Were people working full-time in office? Was it a hybrid, or were they working completely remotely? We didn't have that information. On the DEI piece, I should say, before I get to that, we had also asked about if there was known fraud, what steps were being taken within the agencies to combat it, and then how could they help us find cost-saving methods, things that we could maybe trim back, or if there weren't, we just needed just basic data so we could start making really good decisions. DEI was another question that we had asked, is how many of your FTEs include diversity or any type of title in that, because we just wanted to know. We have different agencies that have different amounts of DEI employees, and we need to know, could we centralize that? Could we bring it together? Is there cost savings in that? We had never talked about rolling it back. Unfortunately, the agencies and the commissioners were prevented from giving us all of that information. But on the DEI piece specifically, what we were told as we started to get answers back is that that is embedded in everything that we do because of the work that's been done. And so in my mind, that means that Minnesota has taken steps so much forward with all state employees that we no longer need specific DEI employees because it is already embedded in everybody that's working for the state. That was really exciting to hear, and we look forward to working toward that.
I asked this of the Democrats, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, how do you expect events to unfold on the House floor this afternoon?
We are really excited. You know, being in the chamber every day with just 67 members, it has been very quiet and obviously very quick because it's about a 4-minute session until we could actually get organized. I think what you can expect today is a little bit of reserve on both sides, a little bit of, unsureness and nervous, but the excitement when you walk into that chamber as an elected official, you are one of just about 5,000 people to ever hold that opportunity and that honor of serving constituents. And there is an awe that is given when you walk in there. I would hope that everyone, all 133 members, would feel that same bit of awe. From there, we know there's a lot of work to do, and we are going to have to mend fences and build some bridges, and so that we can work together well. But I think today will be a really exciting day in the House of Representatives.
Are you going to give the same speech that you did on January 14th?
Do you want me to? Did you like it? I will have just a short and condensed, because I would like to address the entire full body as a newly elected speaker.
Can you respond to Republican criticism that you're giving up on election integrity by allowing Brad Tapke to be seated?
I think it's important to recognize that election integrity is important for Democrats and Republicans. We have an opportunity to move forward legislation that addresses the most concerning things out of people that are concerned about election integrity. Our Chair Quam is the chair of the Elections Committee. You'll see legislation moving through that committee that can address some concerns in an ongoing manner.
Representative Boardman said that what you guys did for a couple of weeks was akin to playing house. Is that kind of rhetoric going to be difficult to get past as you try to work together?
House Republicans came in to do the work that we were elected to do, and we look forward to moving forward and continuing that work. I don't think negative rhetoric or hitting and pitting at each other is going to be helpful. I understand that that happens. We're in a political realm here. It's kind of what happens all the time. I don't think it's helpful, though.
Do you think it needs to be addressed how a tie operates moving forward? Should there be a law change that would allow a person to be a presiding officer with more authority? How do you think that this potential issue in the future should be handled by this legislature?
You know, it's really interesting because the quorum challenge that you saw happen in the Supreme Court, that had never been challenged before. We were looking at the Constitution, we were looking at the intent. We fully felt that with only 133 members that were even eligible on day one, that a quorum would have been 67. The Supreme Court's opinion was different than that. So these are new findings in ways, something that had never been challenged before. As far as solutions going forward, those are discussions that will be ongoing. There's nothing specific that we'll be doing to address that right now, but ongoing discussions, because even though the Senate can never tie because of their numbers, you know, the full membership, we know the House at 134, a tie could potentially be out there again. It takes 45 years to get to the next one, but here we are.
Representative Miska, you had that motion at the desk these last couple of days. Are you withdrawing that? Are you planning to move forward with that? Going to dealing with pay?
Yeah, so if there's a quorum today, there would be no need to make the motion to compel the attendance of absent members. We expect there will be a quorum today. We expect there will be an election of a different presiding officer. And so questions about, you know, that motion and Secretary of State Steve Simon's authority to recognize or not recognize members, really, none of those will be live legal disputes. Hopefully at 3:45 or whenever today we have a change in the circumstance in the House.
And what will your title be? Maybe I missed it. Are you going to be majority leader, minority leader? Is that going to change?
So that 67, 66, it's a Republican majority, so I'm the majority leader.
And after the tie, do you think you're?
I guess we'll have another conversation about that.
Just for 1 minute too, I know that Chair Robbins is here, and she does have that very first official fraud meeting, the first official committee meeting of this going forward, and the fraud. Representative Robbins was also a part of our negotiating team too, and so I'm going to have her speak for just a moment.
Thank you. Look forward to the first fraud committee meeting, 8:15 on Monday morning. The OLA will be coming to present on all the different recommendations that have not been followed by the agencies. So this will be our great first look as a bipartisan committee on the ways that we as a legislative branch can exercise oversight of the executive branch. And I very much look forward to our colleagues being named. I expect that to be this afternoon, so we'll see who joins us from our Democrat colleagues. But we're very much ready to hit the ground rolling on Monday morning, so hope many of you will be there. And in addition, on the work on the committee, I just want to stress that my colleagues have already shared that this is a win for co-equal branches of government. And that is the most important thing that history will record on this outcome of this negotiation. If all the majority party had shown up on January 14th, Representative Demuth would have been elected Speaker that day for 2 years. And we finally got that same outcome where she will be Speaker Demuth for 2 years. And that is very important for the integrity of the legislature, that we are not being told what to do by the courts, that we are not being told what to do by the executive branch, but that we as an independent, co-equal branch of government have gotten to the result we would have gotten to if they had not denied quorum. And denial of quorum is not a way that ties should be addressed going forward. So I'm thrilled with that outcome.
Is your committee and chairmanship, Chair Robbins, one of the biggest political victories, though? I think speakership seemed inevitable, but is this a big win for you?
Yes, we're very grateful, and I think it shows the commitment that Minnesotans want us to do this work. And I think the strength of our committee going forward and the fact that I will continue to be chair for 2 years and not go to a co-chair relationship shows that we are committed to doing this work and that we are responding to what Minnesotans want. They don't want their taxpayer money wasted, and they also want services provided to people who need them. And that doesn't happen when there's fraud. People who deserve services are not being well served.
Representative Miska, on the motion that you had to tell members back, you also wanted to preclude them from getting per diem pay for the rest of the session. Is that also off the table with their coming back today?
Sure, so that motion would have been a motion to institute a future penalty for someone who didn't show up to the next day after that motion had passed. Obviously, that motion has never passed, and hopefully today members will be there, and so there would be no even under that motion, there would be no penalty that would go into place for members who are going to show up for work today. I did want to clarify one thing about, in reference to your question, Mary, about speaker being inevitable, and Speaker Damath had addressed this earlier today. The written offer that they gave us on Monday morning did not have Speaker Damath for 2 years. It acknowledged that Speaker Damath would be Speaker Damath unless and until they returned to a tie, but it was the exact same structure as what they had put out publicly before session. I think on January 13th was the date of the previous offer, where it would immediately go back to full co-speaker model. And it was not until Tuesday that they acknowledged that the results of the election that is going to happen today, that there's a speaker that will be elected, and that speaker is the Speaker of the House for 2 years. That was first put on the table on Tuesday, and it was Tuesday, I think, where the broad strokes of the agreement really came together. And these days all sort of blurred together. Yesterday was a day of translating those broad strokes into the motion that I will offer today to memorialize the agreement and adopt temporary rules.
To follow up on Caroline's question real quick, or you representing this guy.
Yeah.
Is there any recourse, any House rules that would allow you to seek retroactive, kind of like fines, penalties for not showing the first couple of weeks? Would you consider such a motion?
So we'll have a Rules Committee meeting today where we're going to pass the same traditional resolutions that happen, and then it's up to every member to apply for housing and per diem under those resolutions.
You mentioned a written offer to have her as speaker for 2 years. Was there a verbal offer prior to Tuesday?
No, the offer that was put on the table on Monday by the Democrats was the same offer that was put on the table on January 13th. So the idea that this is basically, and then there was significant movement from that over the next, 36, 48 hours to get to the agreement that we have before us. So the idea that, this was I think I heard on the radio this morning that this was the spin, that this was essentially the same offer that was on the table 2 weeks ago. If that were the case, then they moved significantly backwards on Monday. I don't think that the Democrats are saying that they did that. I think they're trying to massage a little bit to save a little bit of face about the agreement that they ended up having to accept.
How much did the bigger group help, maybe Representative Torkelson and the super secret handshake? Did bringing in the bigger group make it a little more congenial? And can we still ask for the handshake to reenactment?
No reenactments today. I think, yes, it helps to have more people in the room, but I'm so proud of our Speaker to be and Majority Leader, because they held strong throughout these negotiations and negotiated in a respectable way. I think that's so important. We've talked a lot about the institution and the integrity of the institution. There's some repair work to be done, frankly. We need to have a better understanding of how we resolve issues like that might come up like this in the future. Ties are very unusual, but they have happened now twice in Minnesota history. If you know the 1979 history, you know that ended very poorly for Republicans. That's not going to happen in 2025. This will not end poorly for us because we've constructed an agreement that protects our caucus and the integrity of the institution.
Will it end on time?
Yes.
Yes.
It has to end. Now, now you might want to qualify what that ending looks like. We're going to work hard to end this on time with an agreement. It's got to happen. And why not get the work done in a timely fashion? Many of us from outstate have other lives besides our work here at the legislature. I'm a farmer, for instance. We have work to do besides sitting here butting heads with our colleagues. So I certainly will be pushing hard to get an agreement in place on time.
Tell us about your chainsaw collection.
That we'll let the history writers decide if that is historic or not. But I do have, by far, the largest, most complete, most significant chainsaw collection in that room.
I think the discussion would maybe more accurately be described as Representative Torkelson chainsaw shaming Representative Portman for her smaller chainsaw collection.
Thank you.
Chainsaw shaming.
I love the idea.
I don't know, I stepped out for a minute.
Fancy handshake. I think we should work on that.
Oh, yeah, from the Parent Trap?
Yeah, from the Parent Trap.
With the music.
Exactly. I think we should have you guys work on that.